I'm Katie Couric. Tonight, a stunning defeat for President Bush, the end of immigration reform.
A lot of us worked hard to see if we couldn't find common ground. It didn't work.
The Senate kills the immigration overhaul and the president's hope for one last big piece of legislation.
George Bush is beyond being a lame duck president. He's a dead duck president.
Seafood shocker, millions of pounds of Chinese fish, shrimp, and eel are stopped from coming into the U.S. We'll tell you what you need to know. Plus, the Eagles are back in Philadelphia and all over the country. They're finally off the endangered species list and soaring again.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Hello, everyone. It was the bill that President Bush had hoped would be one of the crowning domestic achievements of his presidency, a plan to put millions of illegal immigrants on the path to citizenship while tightening our borders. But today, the Senate killed the immigration overhaul, and members of the president's own party deserted him. We have two reports tonight. First, here's Cheryl Atkinson.
It came down to the last second with intense arm twisting right up to the vote, but opponents had the stronger hand. The vote killed immigration reform, a bill that was forged by an unlikely coalition including President Bush and one of the most liberal voices in the Senate, Ted Kennedy.
It's extremely difficult for me to understand how the will of the American people want to continue to have broken borders. It's difficult for me to believe that the American people want to continue to have sweatshops and exploiting people that are undocumented in our society.
Most Americans do want reform, just not this brand, which would have let 12 million illegal immigrants stay in the U.S. with conditions. A new CBS News poll shows only 13% of Americans thought the Senate should pass the bill. 35% said no. More than half didn't know enough about it to say one way or the other. The bill needed 60 votes to stay alive. It only got 46, just 12 of them Republican. That's even after the president put his muscle behind it, lobbying in person on Capitol Hill and calling key senators at home last night.
A lot of us worked hard to see if we couldn't find common ground. It didn't work.
In the end, more Republicans were influenced by the backlash from their constituents at home. Conservative Georgia Senators Johnny Isakson and Saxby Chambliss helped to write the bill, then, faced by angry protests in their districts, changed their minds. Both voted against it today. So did Republican leader Mitch McConnell. Homeland Security Chief Michael Chertoff is obviously frustrated by repeated calls to merely enforce existing laws. Today he said he will, but that his agents face constant opposition when they try to build fences and enforce employment law.
On the one hand, they are obliged to enforce the law. On the other hand, when they try to do so, they get a tremendous amount of pushback from the very citizens whom the law is supposed to be protecting and serving.
Republicans backing the bill tried to bring more colleagues on board, in part by arguing the president badly needs a domestic victory. But in the end, senators in Mr. Bush's own party turned their backs on him. He just didn't have the clout to make the difference. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Be wise about how we spend.
I'm Jim Axelrod at the White House. President Bush was in no mood for question.
Are you sorry you didn't do more?
It's about his stunning defeat on immigration. It's not just that this is a clear rebuke of his confident prediction 2.5 weeks ago.
I believe we can get it done. I'll see you at the bill signing.
It's that the defeat was sealed by his own party. After personally lobbying many Republicans, more than 3 dozen defected. Immigration was Mr. Bush's signature domestic issue, and he used whatever remaining political capital he had left. Remember those hot and sweaty trips to the Southwest so he could control the border? Which is exactly why historians will look back on this as a defining day in the Bush presidency.
Failure of the immigration bill means that George Bush is beyond being a lame duck president. He's a dead duck president.
And it's not just immigration. When the White House claimed executive privilege today to fight congressional subpoenas in the U.S. Attorney firings investigation, a top Republican complained the White House was just continuing to protect the president's embattled attorney general.
And while the investigation is lagging, Attorney General Gonzalez continues to serve. But as long as he continues to serve, the department is in disarray.
Add to that this week's high-profile Republican defections about the war, which sent National Security Advisor Stephen Hadley to Capitol Hill to see if he could contain the damage.
It's when people in your own party turn on you when you're a president is when your policies crumble.
One GOP insider told me when it comes to the president's influence, it's how low can you go? If the president's approval ratings were just at traditional lows, it might be different. But they're not, he added. They're at historic lows. So now, it's every man for himself. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, the White House.
Some important health news now that may actually change your mind about dinner tonight. Today, the federal government cracked down on seafood imported from China after some of it was found to contain dangerous antibiotics. Bob Orr has the latest.
The government's new restrictions will have the biggest impact on shrimp. Each year, the U.S. imports 150 million pounds of shrimp from China. It's a jumbo $300 million annual market. Now Chinese farm-raised shrimp is off limits. Future imports will be blocked unless suppliers can show the seafood is clean.
When they've arrived, they are held. The company, the importer, needs to then prove to FDA that the product is safe to proceed into commerce.
Bowing to pressure from consumer critics, the Food and Drug Administration today issued so-called import alerts for Chinese shrimp and eel, popular for sushi, plus 3 types of fish: basa, dace, and catfish. China is the third biggest supplier of farm-raised seafood to the U.S., but recent testing has shown at least 15% of imported Chinese seafood is contaminated with outlawed antibiotics, known to cause cancer in lab mice. The chemicals are used to help shrimp and fish survive in squalid, overcrowded fisheries along the coast of China. Many European countries have long banned the chemical-laced fish. Now watchdog groups say the FDA's new restrictions aren't enough.
This is a seafood that is especially dangerous because of the way that it's grown. And so if you can choose wild-caught shrimp from the U.S., you're a lot safer.
The FDA insists the seafood presents no immediate health threat to consumers.
While we don't believe that exposures to date really cause a concern or a hazard, obviously, in the long term, the prudent thing to do to protect public health is to stop this.
In New York's Chinatown today, seafood shoppers seemed unaware and unconcerned about where their shrimp came from.
I checked to make sure they look right.
If they don't look right,
If they look right, you don't buy it.
The FDA is not recalling Chinese seafood already in supermarkets and home freezers, and officials say it is safe to eat, but there'll be no more of it until suppliers can prove it's chemical-free. Bob Orr, CBS News, Washington.
Meanwhile, that problem with tainted toothpaste from China may be bigger than we initially thought. Today's New York Times reported 900,000 tubes have been distributed in this country, mostly in Georgia and North Carolina. The toothpaste, which is sold under the brand name Pacific, contains a toxic chemical used in antifreeze. By the way, the government says if you have any toothpaste marked made in China, throw it out. Now to a Supreme Court decision that will force many public school districts to rethink their plans for achieving diversity in the classroom. Today, the justices ruled that education officials cannot use race alone to determine which schools students should attend. The court was split 5-4 with the conservative wing led by Chief Justice John Roberts in the majority. However, one of those 5, Justice Anthony Kennedy, left the door open for using race to integrate, but only under limited circumstances. Wyatt Andrews has more from the Supreme Court. Wyatt, I understand this was one of the most highly anticipated rulings of this entire session.
Exactly right, Katie. This was a landmark ruling that in fact was emotional for some of these justices. But the court ruled today that the nation's schools may no longer use race alone to assign students to schools, even if it's to achieve racial integration.
In his ruling, Chief Justice John Roberts took aim at the way Seattle assigns students to schools after classifying them as white or non-white, and the way Louisville labels students as black or other. Blatant racial assignment is illegal, Roberts said, even when the goal is diversity. The way to stop discrimination on the basis of race, Roberts wrote, is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. Seattle parents who opposed racial assignments emotionally praised the court for finally, they said, being colorblind.
This is the United States of America. It shouldn't matter what your skin color is.
Shame on the court. But civil rights groups called it wrong-headed to see attempts at school integration as a new age form of discrimination.
Integration, inclusion, is not the same as segregation and exclusion. It's that simple.
Complicating everything was the swing vote of Justice Anthony Kennedy, who ruled the Louisville and Seattle plans were illegal, but also said that sometimes race can be considered as one component to achieve a diverse student population. That one component language, experts say, muddies the waters.
How in the world are people on the ground, school officials, administrators, lawyers, going to decipher his test when they want to try to use race as some sort of a component?
In the court today, there was a polite but quite pointed disagreement over the meaning of Brown versus Board of Education, the famous 1954 desegregation case from Kansas. After Chief Justice Roberts recalled that the Brown decision required public school admission on a non-racial basis, Justice Breyer, reading an impassioned dissent, called that a cruel distortion of history to compare Topeka, Kansas in the 1950s to Louisville and Seattle today. But the legacy of the Brown decision is exactly what has changed. For the last 53 years, federal law has allowed and sometimes required the use of race to achieve school desegregation. Now, if race is the determining factor in a school assignment, it's illegal. Katie?
And Wyatt, this is far from over, isn't it?
It is, Katie. If you look back at Justice Kennedy's opinion that race sometimes can be used to achieve diversity, some scholars are going to say that's a 5-4 decision in the other way. It makes it likely that more school lawsuits will be needed to test out what Kennedy means, and many more years in the courts to sort it out.
Wyatt Andrews at the Supreme Court tonight. Wyatt, thank you. And this business note, the Wall Street Journal newsroom wasn't quite as busy as usual this morning when unionized reporters didn't show up for work. They said they were protesting Rupert Murdoch's bid to buy the paper's parent company and the company's latest contract proposal. The reporters did, however, show up for work this afternoon. There's much more CBS News ahead still to come. High anxiety in California, where firefighters continue to battle a wildfire and homeowners worry a change in the wind could mean they're next. And up next, a CBS exclusive, the hunt for al-Qaeda in Iraq. Lara Logan reports on how U.S. forces are closing in thanks to their former enemies. Another deadly day in Baghdad. A car bomb blew apart a crowded bus station during this morning's rush hour. At least 22 people were killed and more than 50 wounded. Sunni militants are suspected. Also in Baghdad today, a U.S. soldier was killed by a roadside bomb while on patrol. Meanwhile, U.S. and Iraqi forces continue to hunt down al-Qaeda fighters, and they're getting help from Iraqi civilians who risk their own lives in the process. Baquba is a hotbed of insurgents north of Baghdad, and CBS News was there as U.S. troops searched al-Qaeda hideouts. Chief Foreign Correspondent Lara Logan has this exclusive report.
Okay, let's go. This is what can happen to you when you try and help U.S. soldiers in Iraq. You may be led away blindfolded with your hands bound, as this man was, but it was for his own protection. He's an informant, only minutes before, working with these soldiers, pointing out al-Qaeda's houses. Why? Because he says al-Qaeda burnt down his house and killed his brother.
They blew up houses and arrested people for no reason. They want to make the Americans leave so they can occupy Iraq.
Al-Qaeda was in charge here until 10 days ago.
If you smoked in public, if you mixed the wrong kind of vegetables on your vegetable cart, you got beaten, tortured, or worse.
Colonel Townsend says locals told them it was in this square that Al-Qaeda publicly executed well over 100 people.
We found an Al-Qaeda torture house with torture implements in it. We found 3 al-Qaeda aid stations equipped to varying degrees, one pretty sophisticated with oxygen and defibrillators and stuff like that. So I don't think we've had a lack of contact. Now what we have had is a lack of heavy fighting.
That hasn't meant a lack of danger for Colonel Townsend's soldiers. This controlled detonation failed to blow up an IED buried deep underground, so they tried again. This one of 15 roadside bombs the soldiers found in an area the size of one U.S. city block. Finding the culprits isn't easy. Wires were traced to this empty house from which IEDs could be triggered across the city. But the family just across the road insisted they knew nothing about the men living there, a familiar tale here. Colonel Townsend's Iraqi counterpart compels the father to swear on the Islamic Holy Quran as he grows more and more distressed during the interrogation. In the end, the soldiers believe him and keep moving through the city. Desperate families approach to find out if it's safe to return to their homes. But that still depends on how long U.S. soldiers are there to keep Al-Qaeda out. Lara Logan, CBS News, Baghdad.
Still ahead, they're packing up and preparing for the worst. The latest on California's stubborn wildfire when we come back. Some good news tonight. Slowly but surely, that raging wildfire near Lake Tahoe in California is being tamed. Firefighters have it more than half contained tonight, and they have kept it from spreading into more residential areas. But that could all change in the blink of an eye and a gust of wind, as Bill Whitaker reports.
Another day of high anxiety in South Lake Tahoe, especially for homeowners like Dick Klein. He was forced to flee when the fire flared within 5 feet of his house this week.
They were standing right here shooting water at the fire that was just off the edge.
He hopes it won't, but knows it can happen again.
The wind could shift at any time and turn this thing back around.
Across the street, the Reyes family is ready to run at a moment's notice, their car packed with what they hold dear.
All the stuff here, I have my mother's ashes with me too. I wouldn't leave her. She's in the car.
With the winds picking up again, June Reyes finds the firefighters outside her door a comfort and a stark reminder this fire is still a threat.
There are still hundreds of hot spots in the interior of the fire area that could flare up, and they could cause embers to float into this neighborhood.
We'll sleep with one eye open.
Watching anxiously for a return of this when the fire went wild Tuesday and the people in its path went frantic.
I haven't slept since yesterday. I haven't eaten since yesterday.
Today, in frontline neighborhoods, people are cleaning up and packing up. Jeff Cook has evacuated twice since Sunday.
I was worried about what I would have to tell my wife and kids if our house did burn down.
Folks living here in the line of fire say they won't be completely at ease until this fire is completely contained, which authorities say might not be until July 3rd. Tom Reyes gets emotional talking about the firefighters who saved his neighborhood. All the neighbors are grateful they're here, but can't wait for them to go.
It's not over until I see all these trucks leave Tahoe, and we'll wave goodbye.
Bill Whitaker, CBS News, South Lake Tahoe, California.
For more on the Lake Tahoe fire, including some very dramatic pictures, you can go to cbsnews.com and click on Tahoe Wildfire. From fire to rain, way too much of it right now in north and central Texas. Rescue crews helped stranded residents as mandatory evacuations were ordered for thousands of people along the rising Brazos River west of Fort Worth. On Lake Marble Falls, an empty boat was swept over a gushing spillway. More than a week of almost nonstop rain and flooding has claimed 11 lives. Up next, the Eagle has landed. The symbol of our country makes a remarkable comeback. We leave you tonight with a real success story. 4 decades ago, the U.S. government set out to save our national bird, the bald eagle, which was on the verge of extinction. Today, at a ceremony in Washington, the eagle was officially taken off the list of threatened and endangered species. John Blackstone has more on the return of an icon.
Soaring over concrete and rooftops, the bald eagles nesting in Philadelphia this year may provide the best evidence of all that America's bird is back. It's the first time in 200 years there are real Philadelphia eagles. There are urban eagles, too, in Rock Island, Illinois, at home among the bridges over the Mississippi. In the 1960s, there were only a few hundred bald eagles left. Now they are found across the country.
In the lower 48 states, we're now up to, I think, approaching 10,000 breeding pairs.
Peter Sharp has personally assisted several of those breeding pairs. That's his hand returning 3 young eagles to a nest on California's Catalina Island. It's a job with some hazards.
Ow!
Eagles disappeared from Catalina and the other Channel Islands more than 40 years ago, wiped out by the pesticide DDT. Efforts to reestablish them in the islands began at the San Francisco Zoo, where John Akins has run one of the nation's largest captive breeding programs. Oh, yeah, yes. Hello there.
She says, don't get too close.
She warned me. It's a beautiful call.
Yeah, it is. It is.
More than 100 eagles born at the zoo have been sent to the Channel Islands, and some of those birds have started breeding in the wild.
Now those very chicks that I was looking at in the eggs are raising their own babies in Southern California, so it's very gratifying.
So you feel like a grandfather?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Very much so.
But the lingering effects of DDT can still make the eagle's eggs fragile and unlikely to hatch, so they're collected from the nests and carefully nurtured in incubators. When the young eagles hatch, a bumper crop of 7 this year, they are hand-raised for a few weeks until they're ready to go back home. But this year on Catalina, for the first time, eagles hatched with no human intervention. Across the country, the eagles' story is much the same. They still need us to care, but it looks like they're ready to make it on their own. John Blackstone, CBS News, San Francisco.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you again tomorrow. Good night.